welcome. This is your host and your friend Randy Tani, and welcome to this amazing interview. Our guest for today is Zuniga, who's going to share about addiction. He's a therapy mentor and who has had his own experience of addiction. And today, he's going to share a wonderful experience with us and how to overcome addiction. So, with pleasure and honor, let's welcome Eric. Hi, Eric. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Corinne. I really appreciate being here, and I do want to take a moment to think a little bit about all the folks that are struggling with the winter season that's coming about. And I know that a lot of people have thinking about it and what it means and all these ideas. So my heart goes out to anyone who's working through a winter sort of feelings and emotions that can be overwhelming. So I know that happens. So, but thank you for the introduction. I could say a little bit more, but we'll go where it goes. We'll kind of go where the flow goes in our conversation. How does that sound?
That sounds great, Eric.
Yeah, and I know that the topic is addictions, and there's something on my mind that keeps coming up, especially when we first began messaging each other back and forth, was really, what are your thoughts about addiction? And, the first thing that comes to mind a lot of times is my thought is that I don't believe in addictions, and I don't have to, and no one has to believe in them. And if it serves a person to believe that addictions exist, well, then by all means, go ahead and believe in them, but you don't have to if you don't want to. What we're talking about when we talk about addictions, at least from my understanding and experience, is that we're talking about a way of thinking or a state of mind. And, when a person wants to, is overwhelmed with their thinking and they want to get some space, and no one never really teaches us in society how to get space from our own thinking. I mean, when we're kids, we do this. That's not really getting space. That's playing games. And I think there's a point where some people don't know what else to do. And I was one of those people. I had experiences with self-medication because I didn't know what to do or where to turn to get this chatter to calm down. Because the idea wasn't to have a party or entertainment. The idea was that the chatter was too much. And so I want to throw a shout out to all of those folks that are saying, I'm not even sure if this is an addiction. I noticed something else going on. Because if people are noticing something else going on, that there is some sort of feeling that this may have to do with their thinking more than what it has to do with their biochemistry, because our biochemistry is a result of our thinking. And so when our thinking changes, our biochemistry changes. And so this is really something I just want to say off the get-go about folks. And everyone has a right to their path about how to move beyond chemicals or behaviors or attitudes or certain things. Because if you think about it, all paths lead to oneness, really. And so I just wanted to start there and just say that I'm just going to talk about my path. There's many paths out there, but I'll speak about mine because I know I seem to know that more than any other. And then we'll just kind of see where we go. So thanks for letting me share that little piece about addiction. Yeah.
Wonderful. Eric, these days I see lots of people suffering from addiction to porn, smoking, alcohol, and many things. So I want to ask you, why are people suffering from addiction and how can they cure it?
Right, yeah, because people are feeling that they aren't in control of their own actions. And they want to figure out, what is this? And you're right, the easiest label that's available is, well, this is what an addiction is. It's an inner trigger that's happening, and it's causing an individual to sort of respond through a subconscious way of thought wavelength. But really, if you boil it all down, it all just comes down to thought and thinking. And it's a way of thinking that may have served a purpose in the past It's a way of thinking that may have been our best thinking, and we just haven't figured out a better way to think. And it's very motivating because thought is infused with consciousness, and consciousness in this context, in the three principle context, is a motivating feeling that corresponds with the thinking. So if the thinking is I'm overwhelmed with my thoughts, the motivating feeling is going to be, I got to get these thoughts out of here. And if there's a way that seems to work, it may not be the best. And the way that I attempted to seemed to work, but it wasn't the best. And I always knew in the back of my mind that if I could find a better way, I'm going to do something else, because this is never really what I wanted. And I guarantee you, there's not one person on the planet that has a habitual use of something, or a habitual behavior, or a habitual way of thinking, really, again, boils down to thinking, and that they would rather it just not be there. So this isn't about willpower. This is about using the energy of our mind innocently and not realizing how believable our own thinking can be, to believe that we're overwhelmed, to believe that we're happy, to believe that we're sad, to believe that we're an addict. I mean, these are all things that we can do with our thinking. It's incredible. And but for a person who is struggling, definitely, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to suffer, because there's folks, just like on your show, Karan, that talks about ways to reflect about addiction and ways to heal and find solutions and move beyond an addiction. And so I've moved beyond it. I don't even know what it is or isn't. It's a very simplified version of a person struggling on their journey through life, in my opinion. It just super simplifies the journey of life. And to punish a person who's going through life, because even in this moment, we don't even know what's going to happen in the next moment. Neither of us have been here at this moment. Whether we're 5 years old or 99 years old, this is a new moment for everyone on the planet. And for that, and I heard people say this, for that, we all have our sobriety, because the moment you wake up, if you haven't used, you have your sobriety. And I think in a lot of addiction modalities, they don't acknowledge that, well, if you're not using, you're actually sober or clean, or you're just dormant, and that's fine. And it doesn't have to be a straight line. Healing is never a straight line. Insight is never a straight line. It comes and it goes. And really, if a person out there is struggling and looking for a cure, the cure is insight. It's always been insight, because that's what allows a person to see beyond the struggle, to see beyond the condition of themselves as a condition, is an insight. And that's all about wisdom. Let me stop there for a moment. Thanks.
You were talking about insight, and you said that healing is in the insight. So could you talk more about the insight, and how does it help people heal from addiction?
No, that's a very good question, Karan, because, when you think about an addiction, or you think about a person struggling with whether a behavior or a chemical, what's going on, and the only way to figure it out isn't through a book or a methodology or a classification. It's through understanding. So really what I hear in that question is, how can we understand ourselves and another person who's struggling with something? And that really is what wisdom and insight is about. It's about this incredible burst of understanding that allows us to see beyond the momentary thinking, the momentary issues, or the momentary everything, and see the big picture. So that's why when I say if a person's looking for a cure, I would call it insight. I would call it wisdom, because even if a person doesn't have a belief in a higher power, even if a person hasn't subscribed to a modality, if they have an insight that says, I just need to drink more water, that could be a life-saving insight, an incredible insight. That's why I was saying at the beginning, if a person feels that they need to look at themselves as being an addict, well, in order to help them heal in their journey, then by all means. But if a person feels that looking at themselves as an addict is not helpful at all, or it creates a deficit or a stigma, well, then there should be no reason why that person would have to do that. That's what insight is. It's guiding us. And sometimes that insight says, geez, I don't think this is a good idea. And so that's what insight is. But we follow through with it. And then we get hindsight, where it says, geez, I really shouldn't have done that, but I did it anyway. It's too late. But that's hindsight. That's another level of insight, because we can reflect about our past. That's how we can put closure on a lot of issues in the past. And while we are talking about addiction, what we really are talking about is trauma, is trying to heal from trauma. We may never know what the traumas are that we've been through as children, because, adverse childhood traumas are really in science and statistical science, they're finding out that's one of the mainstays as to why there's so many health issues, why there's so many addiction concerns. It's because of trauma. And trauma are all kinds of things. They're neglect from love and touch. It could be abusive touch. It could be just violent abuse. It could be hunger. One in every 4 children experiences hunger in America. So when it comes to trauma that children experience, and those adverse ones, it does carry through to adulthood. And so I want to reiterate the innocence of someone who might be using, because it's an innocent process. Everybody wants to feel better. Everybody wants to feel good. And so it's completely innocent to reach out and find a way, even if it doesn't work. It's completely innocent, because it's the best that a person could do. They're not using my best or your best. They're using their own best. But I do want to continue to say a little bit more that no matter what the struggle is, it will always reach a closure. And for someone who's struggling, there will be a moment where it'll reach closure, and acknowledge yourself for that. Acknowledge it, because these are the things we forget. We're in the heat of the moment. We're like, oh, I wish this, I wish that. But once those things come true, that moment of calm, then acknowledge it. And acknowledge that the more a person acknowledges that they have insight and wisdom, the more it will start to be obvious. So, right, if you found a cure, you want to start manufacturing it, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're manufacturing wisdom, but we're not doing it through a technique. We're doing it through awareness, through conscious awareness, saying to ourselves, hey, I'm getting caught up in my thinking right now if I think I'm an addict. And the only thing that's going to get me uncaught is a thought that goes beyond that state of thinking. And so usually we just call it wisdom and insight. And that's inside of us somewhere, not a specific location, but it's everywhere inside of us, it's everywhere outside of us. So we really have a pretty good opportunity to find something, to find a way out of the abyss. There is always a way. We just have to give ourselves a chance, a second chance, a third chance to do it. Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit more about that piece. Thanks.
Cool. Great. And like now we know that there's wisdom which is always guiding us. But what is stopping us from accessing the wisdom?
Oh boy, that's really good, because it does seem like something's in the way. And it seems like it won't get out of the way. And I want to share a story about losing my wallet, which was happening so frequently that it got to the point where I didn't anticipate this. And what happened was, is I lost it again. It always happens at the grocery store because I'm trying to go in and out. I have all this anxiety about going into a store and I don't really want to be there. And I'm like trying to get out, grab the groceries, go. And finally, I just said to myself, you know what? If it's there, it's there. If it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. And I just felt this calm. It's like, this is just life. And I'm superimposing my feelings, my emotions on this life as if losing my wallet is bad or losing my wallet means something. And so what I'm saying is that it doesn't mean I'm bad and it doesn't mean anything. It just means that my thinking was on high octane and I was in a rush and I had anxiety, and with anxiety, I tend to be less focused. And with any emotion that's sort of out of balance, we tend to be less focused. So, but I didn't apply the self-judgment this time. And I noticed that when I didn't apply it, everything continued to be almost like a neutral. It was almost like as if there was nothing wrong. It was just, this is just what happens in life. And so the reason why I'm sharing this story is because I'm the one who's manifesting the theme of my experience. I mean, I'm not manifesting the trees, and maybe if I did, let me know, but the trees and the stars and the sky and all of that, but I'm manifesting the way that I look at it, the way that I look at life. And it becomes very obvious when we have that moment and we were looking at life a certain way, like let's say frustration. Oh, this is frustrating part of my life. I have to deal with this frustrating relationship or frustrating job or whatever, school, who knows, whatever the issue is, the person automatically goes into that mode of, oh, this is going to be one of those challenges. That's the thinking that hooks us into these ideas of conditioned thinking. And when we see beyond them, that's the insight. That's the wisdom that I was talking about earlier, because we're seeing something we hadn't seen before. And that's our leap towards that light out of that tunnel of abyss. We just keep making one leap after the other. And eventually the light is going to get brighter and brighter.
Great, great. Okay, Eric, now I would like to ask you to share your own story. Like, what is your experience with addiction and how did you overcome that?
No, good. Yeah, well, my own story is really tied into the work that I do. And so I know that in the beginning I shared a little bit, we both shared a little bit about what I'm doing now, Northern California, 3P coach or mentor. And, I'm a human being to begin with. And I think that and we all have in our own way stumbled upon the three principles. And when we do, we get a sense of what they're about, because they're about our ability. They're about our innate functions. And the exciting thing is that they're universal, and we're not really talking about something that could be applied in one discipline, but it can't be applied in another. It's basically the offshoot of all application is an energetic source. And while the three principles can't really say exactly what it is, because no one really could fully describe it, we know that there is an energetic source that is behind our ability to shift and change and to heal and grow and to move beyond trauma and to move beyond addictions. And I knew this, but I didn't know enough about it. So I had to do my own exploring. So as a clinician, while I was working in the field, I knew that people were changing, but I didn't know how, didn't know why. But every time that I would connect with a person, like we're connecting here and honoring one another's, ability to think and to have insight, all of a sudden that person would stop displaying their symptoms. And in that moment, they would just be like a regular person. And I noticed that beyond medication, beyond behavioral management, people have resiliency. And I noticed it and I wanted to find it for myself. And it was always a struggle, right? It's easier to clean someone else's yard than it is to clean your own yard, was kind of the struggle that I was experiencing. But what the field did for me is it gave me an opportunity to see how the three principles would, you know, how people would receive it. And it was received really well. It wasn't like, I wasn't like making people like the taste tester, like the king does the taste tester with the people to see if the food is poisoned. It wasn't like that. It was more like, you know, there wasn't anyone in the field that I could turn to be my mentor. So I had numerous mentors, but never one specific mentor to really delve into some of my issues. So I sort of done it sort of distantly and through books. I've read Sid's books, and I did a lot of writings, and then I would have my spurts and my insights. And I think the biggest spurt for me was, can I heal? Is it possible for me to heal? Because from my perspective, it looked like everybody else's issues were really tiny, like little pebbles. And it looked like my issues were boulders. And it was hard for me to think that I could heal. But really, healing in this sense isn't about recuperating. Healing in this sense is about seeing beyond my own thinking. That's the kind of healing that I'm referencing in the 3P realm here, is healing beyond my own thinking, seeing beyond my own thinking ruts. Because we could study the dendrites in the mind and the tiny little synapses, and we could see the ruts of what thinking can do. But what we can't see, and we'll never be able to see, is the consciousness. And so this put me on a journey to explore my own consciousness. And I remember saying to a friend that there's going to be a point in my life where I'm just going to stop self-medicating in this way that I've been doing. And it basically happened. And it self-verified that myself, you, all of us on this planet are extraordinarily flexible in our nature. And it goes beyond neuroplasticity. We're talking the flexibility of this, of ethereal energy. And so I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but that's kind of where I wound up with it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Great. And what do you think about the addiction to porn? Lots of youngsters, they are addicted to watching porn. They watch it every single day. So what message do you have for them?
So this is an interesting one, because when alcohol was, people were trying to help people, support people with their issues with alcohol, it was couched under the idea of an addiction. And now it's in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So officially, in one discipline at least, officially, alcohol is an addiction. I am not sure, but I do believe that porn is in the DSM officially as an addiction. And a lot of people have subscribed to the idea that it is an addiction. And what people aren't realizing is that a lot of what is going on there, what beyond people's ability to see, is re-traumatization. There is a lot of re-traumatizing, because a person is trying to figure out what's going on with their intimacy. And they're doing it with a commercialized version. And it becomes to the point where it's so familiar. In other words, anything that's familiar can seem normal. And so for people that it's not familiar to look at images of nude bodies, that's not going to seem normal at all. For someone who it is normal for, it may not even seem like an addiction. And the reason why I say that is because they're not seeing what this level of thinking is and isn't. And what it is it's a temporary way of how the person is seeing themselves. And it may represent unresolved trauma. It may represent unresolved needs. It could represent a lot of different things. However, it ultimately represents a way of thinking. This person has a way of thinking. And when you uncover all the rubble, you're just going to find that it has to do with some experience that they had when they were learning about their intimacy. And they are now struggling with their intimacy. And now they're being shamed and punished as if it's an addiction or as if it's something wrong and bad. When if a child were to learn how to walk and they fall down because they're just starting, you wouldn't shame and punish that child because the likelihood of them walking is never going to happen. But I'm not suggesting that you should support a person who is either drinking or looking at what do you call I would say objectified images that don't really represent people anymore. Or using administrative paperwork to prevent people from getting jobs. I mean, these are all different ways that people do things in life to feel powerful, to feel like they weren't broken in the first place. But all they are is they're just cries for help. So here we have cries for help because someone is experiencing something and they're not sure what this habit represents. But if they were to work with a practitioner like you or me, they would find that this has to do with their thinking. And when their thinking changes, the habit changes. And when the habit changes, it's as if it was never there in the first place. And that's really what I think a lot of these people are struggling with is there's a lot of deficit-oriented psychology out there that will label these individuals and they will in turn label themselves. But is it possible for someone who has labeled themselves an addict, whether it be through images or chemicals or doing certain things or signing certain papers, can a person change completely? Of course they can. It's happened numerous times and it will continue to happen. And it's not a trick and it's not a technique. It has to do with introspection of realizing what an addiction is and what the thinking is and what it isn't. And it's not even about identifying the specific thoughts. So identifying a specific thought would be more like cognitive behavioral type therapy. So what I'm suggesting here isn't even identifying the thought, it's recognizing that it's there. And that's all you do. The moment you know you're having a feeling, you know you're having a thought. And we're always thinking and we're always feeling. It's just a constant. And so we have all kinds of learning, room to learn, because we could always learn about why these thoughts are there. And they're there for a reason. And they're going to all be part of our healing process if we give them a chance. So that would be my thinking here in this moment, would be to, if someone were to reach out to either you or me or somewhere on the planet to a coach or a mentor about something that they're struggling with, it would be to support that person in recognizing their health, recognizing their wisdom, and recognizing that they have an innate intelligence to leap beyond the condition that they think that they're in.
Wonderful. I learned that it's our thinking that forms the habit. And when we change the thinking, we can change the habit. So how can people change the thinking? Is it about conscious positive thinking, or is it about letting our thoughts go and having new insights?
Yeah, that's a good question, because here's another question. Why would somebody want to change their thinking? And one of the reasons, because they don't like the way that they're thinking, but it's there for a reason. And I think when we start getting caught up in the idea of changing our thoughts, then we start to get caught up in the idea of putting one thought above the other. that this thought isn't is of value as much as this thought. But when we see our thoughts as equally valuable, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter what we're thinking in any given moment. We could be thinking about addiction, and it could be just as valuable as not, because we're the one who makes the judgment call. We're the decider as to what thoughts are comfortable or uncomfortable. And if there is anything to do about an uncomfortable thought, really the only thing to do is just open the mental doors and windows and just let it go out with the breeze of the new thought that's going to be coming in any moment. And I know that's symbolic, but ultimately, that's really all a person is doing when they're caught up in thinking. All a person can do, no matter who it is on the planet, to let go of a thought, to change a thought, really is about quieting thought. That's all it's about. And when a person gets quiet, all of a sudden, they don't have to change anything. It's more about listening to what's in there. It's about deeper listening. So when we think about changing, I would like to switch the paradigm and say it's not so much changing the thought, it's about recognizing a deeper thought to break through it and to open up and to engage it on another level. And then we will find our harmony and we will find our calm when we engage a thought that's more harmonistic and more calm. All of a sudden, that's what we're going to find. So if we want to change a thought, I don't know if it's possible, but it will happen eventually. All I can say is, having a better experience is right around the corner. And it's a matter of putting the radar out for those calmer feelings. Because when we put the radar out for that, we're attracting it. We start to be the magnetize that those insightful thoughts.
Wonderful. I would like to ask you a very interesting question. That is, I see people who are addicted either to drinking alcohol or smoking. So after drinking or smoking, they feel guilty about it. They feel guilty for smoking a lot. They feel guilty for drinking a lot. And after that, abusing their family or doing the bad things. So how can they stop feeling guilty?
Wow, that's an interesting question, because you're really getting to the heart of the matter of what we call addiction, what we call habits, what we call all of these things, because they're all thinking plots, right? They're thinking plots, and some of these plots are huge. And we call them ruts, but they're not really ruts. They're associations. They're more complex than a rut, because if an association comes to the surface, another one will happen, and another one, and another one. So when you talk about an individual who feels guilty for either relapsing or guilty because maybe they said something and they didn't mean it, and they had hindsight, and then they realized it, they didn't even recognize they had the hindsight. So this is important, that when a person is reaching out for help, that a mentor help them see the gifts, the innate gifts that they have already. But so this person may not realize that they have these innate gifts, and they may think, oh, I did something wrong. So this I did something wrong, that's a rut. That's the associations. So you could have one thought, and that one thought could be, I relapsed. And then you could have all the associations. Well, the last time I relapsed, what are associations? The thoughts that we had in the past, and now we're having them in the present again. And these thoughts could be, so-and-so got upset the last time I did this. The last time I did this, I lost my relationship. The last time I did this, I lost this. The last time I did this, this happened. So that feeling of guilt or remorse, that has to do with all of those reference points and those associations that are resurfacing about the last time. And they've done studies, for example, if someone's going to take a test, and every time that they take a test, they have a drink of alcohol. This is a really bad example. We're talking about addiction, but but that they did something. I don't know if it was alcohol or coffee, whatever it was. It was some sort of mood alternating thing. So they would take this mood changer, and then they would study for the test. And then when they took the test, some of them would use the chemical and some of them wouldn't. And what they found is the ones that used the chemical actually scored really high on the test because they were sort of in the state of calm and they were thinking really clearly. Now, the reason why I say it's a bad example, because people might think I'm promoting drug use, but I'm not. I'm just using a study that I somehow forgot the name of. But I'm using the study specifically to say that when a person relapses, it's like that same thing of that study. They're going to have that. Not only is it relapse of their habit, but it's a relapse of their thinking about their habit and about themselves and about all the instances where all the negative things have happened. And so all of those feelings are it's about the body and the mind telling itself how it thinks about itself. So is it bad or good? It's neither. It's a reflection. So self-judgment is a reflection about how a person feels about themselves in any given moment. And that's pretty much all it is.
Great. Wonderful. And I feel like addiction has caused many relationships to fail. There have been fights, regrets. So those who have had the fights in relationships, so how can they heal their relationships?
Well, we're talking about an intimate area where people are sharing extreme details about their life and trust with another person. And there's a lot of factors and variables that could occur in a relationship. And I also want to say that experience is personal. In other words, people experience trauma differently. No one experiences it the same. I mean, for some people, if someone's being abused in a relationship and it's over, some people might actually feel sad. Some people might actually feel happy. We don't know. The point that I'm making is that trauma is not caused from the event. Trauma is caused by the way a person looks at an event. And so the way that we look at domestic violence or intimate partner violence is going to be the way that we think and feel about it. If we realize that these things are natural occurring events because of the container that we're in, and that we don't really have any services to address these to the extent where they are extinguished. And if we address these kinds of issues, they will be extinguished. That's just the nature of extinguishing stuff. The moment you address it, it goes away. And the smaller part of it, or the larger part of it, is the moment when we address our thoughts, they no longer attack us. They no longer invade us. And so intimacy with another person is like intimacy with ourselves. It's learning to live with ourselves and learning to live with this idea that there's a shadow side, because that doesn't exist. That's an archetype because it seems like it. But the shadow side is really just another way of saying the intellect is struggling to let the wisdom shine through, and it fumbled the ball again, and it looks terrible, and it looks like an addiction, and it looks like this, but all it is just trial and error, because these moments have never happened before, and we're giving it our best go around. And that's all we're doing on this planet, and with what we know. And when we connect and align with that deeper wisdom, all of a sudden we don't fumble the ball as much when it comes to how we function in life and how we think of ourselves and how we think of others. But I guess my thought is, is judging oneself ever helpful? And I don't know the answer to that for anyone else. But if it's not helpful, then the next question is going to be, why do it? And the next question after that is, has anyone really ever thought how thinking impacts the way that they look at themselves and the way that they look at addictions? I mean, to me, this is really central to what we're talking about, which is the main question is how we think about addiction is going to reflect our reality about it. That's pretty spot on for everybody on the planet. And which means everyone thinks about it differently. And in my opinion, right, because we have opinions that aren't really grounded in facts, but just it's grounded in feeling and grounded in my heart. And my heart says that if a person is struggling with an addiction because of childhood abuse or trauma, it doesn't make sense to punish that child that is now an adult because they're still struggling, and you shouldn't make something they're struggling with illegal. You should make it a signal that this person just needs help. And we don't really help out our brothers and sisters on this planet as often as I think we should. But again, these are just my opinions. But I think while I did drift away from my story a little bit, that's one of the reasons why I'm in the field of being a mentor, is because I don't want anyone to suffer. And I don't see a reason why anyone should suffer on this planet. And when you find something that makes sense, and because I've worked with so many people and I've seen so many people heal and so many people change, that it just makes sense to keep sharing this. And I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm learning more than I've ever known before. So I'm not stagnant, and there's no book at this point. It's all about recognizing my thought, happy thoughts that connected to something really deep and profound. And I want those deep and profound feelings and moments in my life. And they're not going to happen because I buy a new truck or travel around the world. Feelings, profound feelings, or the feeling of well-being is going to happen when I connect with it. And that's pretty much it. And I can connect with it in the midst of a relapse. I can connect with my well-being in the midst of anything. And so that's why I feel like it's not so much what I'm doing, it's the message of how I support individuals in their journey, and how I wish I would have had this support on my journey. But even though I didn't, it let me know that I am resilient. And if a person is struggling and they don't have all the support, but they're managing to get through, well, guess what? That just shows you're a resilient person. If you are managing to get through another day with very little support, it just, verifies you are a powerful, intelligent human being. So I just want to say that piece there too. And there is more to my story. And I have a series that I did with Rob Cook that's free. So if anyone wants to check with me about that, they can check with me, because my story tends to have a lot of traumatic miniature stories in it. I try not to go into those in too much detail, but it's hard not to. But let's just say that if I hadn't gone through the trauma, if I hadn't gone through self-medication, I wouldn't have learned what it was all about. Because there's no way you can learn all this stuff in a book. It's just not possible. The book only gives you generalizations. But having that lived experience and being able to say, I know without a doubt that everybody on the planet can get through whatever it is that they're going through. I just know it. I just know it. Thanks for letting me share that piece. Yeah.
Great, great. Could you share two most important things that you learned from your own experience?
Here's something interesting. I realized that there is no reason for me, you, or anybody on the planet to give up on themselves. Why would you give up on yourselves? If you're going to give up on anything, give up on the part of yourself that is no longer assisting you. You can give up on the part that no longer works, the thinking that no longer functions. You can give up on it. You can let it go, and you can forgive it and let it do what it needs to do. Because everything that we thought of on this planet, we thought of it for a reason. And it's just like the seasons. They're all there for a reason. We're never going to know why. But they're just, all I'm saying really, and I'll say it the opposite way, which is there's no reason for you or me or anyone on the planet to give up on themselves. And so for that reason, I just want to say, don't give up.
Great. Uh, it's good to say don't give up, but for those who are really struggling, uh, they take the bad decisions. Some people commit suicide. Some people start doing more bad things. How can they have the hope that yes, they can cure the addiction?
Yeah, and the reason why I focus so much on not giving up is because I know that there's no reason to. But if a person isn't hearing that, right? Because there's some things we can hear, and some things we're just not available to hear at any given moment. It doesn't mean it's bad or good. And I'm not even suggesting it as advice. I'm just saying that if a person doesn't give up on themselves, it gives another person like myself an opportunity to lend a hand and reach out and be supportive. Because there are numerous people around the globe that want to be supportive. And when a person is really going through a crisis and that kind of a moment, I know it's really hard to see hope. It's hard to see a reason to not give up. But the mind is functioning just fine because the mind is very, very powerful, and it can make shadowy illusions become so real that they could overwhelm a given moment. That's how powerful the mind is. And so if someone is in a moment where they're in that crisis, there are ways, I would say that as we started the conversation out, reach out for your insight, and your insight will guide you towards the light. And if you have an insight to call a warm line, for example, because there's warm lines in every state now. I think it's the 988 number, and there's the 211, and there's all these numbers that people can call if they need to talk to someone, because the reason why a person's overwhelmed is because they're the thinking in their mind. And the moment they talk to another person who's at a different mindset, they get an opportunity to see a different mindset and join this mindset and get out of their own. So we can rely and we can support one another. While I can't get anyone out of their mindset, if I'm in a different mindset, it can allow another to get out of theirs. And so that's what those warm lines are for. That's what crisis lines are for. That's what those online texting, whatever insight a person has, go for it. If the insight is just relax and don't do anything, wonderful. If the insight is reach out and make a phone call, wonderful. But when it comes from a place of the heart, it usually takes a person leaps and bounds beyond a dark place.
Great, great. I want to ask you a great question. That is, I see lots of people drinking. They drink every single day, but some people, they drink for fun. They just go to parties and drink casually. So, is drinking casually an addiction or not?
I don't know much about drinking casually. I never had any friends that did it. I would think that if a person is drinking casually, is it an addiction? Is it something for me to decide? Well, I don't really believe in addictions in the first place, but I think it is a habit. I think if a person is drinking casually, it is a casual drinking habit. If a person is eating meat on occasion, then it is a on occasion casual meat eating habit. And it just doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't actually interest me. But if that's what a person wants to do, that's fine. If a person feels it's impeding them in any way, then it gives them an opportunity to look at their thinking, not looking at their drinking, looking at their thinking about their drinking, because that's where it all begins. And so that's all I would say about that is, sure, there's criteria. If you fit certain criteria, you could match an addiction. And I think it's probably makes sense to say, though, that every human being on the planet fits a criteria that could fit an addiction or a condition of some sort. So if the objective for a person is to question their intake because they want to learn about themselves, I think that's great. Question it. Be curious about yourself. Go ahead and start. Go ahead and ask yourself, is this something you want to incorporate in your life or not? Just a few thoughts.
Wonderful. And I want to ask you the last question, that is, we were talking about the wisdom that we have access to it all the time. Only our thoughts come in the way. And when we quiet our mind down, we get the insights. So how can we quiet our mind?
Now, there's a lot of techniques out there to quiet a person's mind. And so I'm not a technique person. And here's why. Because when a person quiets their mind with a technique, they are now learning, they have a busy mind and now a technique that's working on the busy mind. But instead of working on the busy mind, acknowledging it, right? Just pointing at the busy mind is pretty much all I do. Is say, guess what, Eric, you got a busy mind. And as I was saying earlier, it's invisible, it's ethereal. You cannot see your thoughts. Thoughts are infused in feelings, and it comes from the energy of the mind. I will call it universal energy of the mind because it's not just my mind, it powers every experience on the planet. And so with that said, this energy is just going to continuously propel my thought into a new thought, into a new thought. And because I know this, all I have to do is point to, oh, look at that thought. That thought's getting kind of jumbly. Oh, look at that thought. That's flowing really well. Oh, look at that thought. That's really calm. So I can see my thoughts more clearly. And just by seeing them, I'm acknowledging where I want to be, where I don't want to be. And through acknowledging that in itself, an insight pops in. In other words, I don't actually have to have the insight or think of it. It will pop in naturally. My mind will quiet naturally. It's like if someone were to say, oh, look, you got a piece of food on your mouth. And you're like, oh, is it? You get quiet. You're like, oh, is it over here? Is it over that? You're like getting really quiet. Where is it? It's right here. And then you find it and you're like, oh, there it is. Oh, so that's all I'm saying about thought is you're never going to see it, but you're going to know the feelings that form from it. And the feelings are either going to be calm or not. And so if they're calm, I can sort of follow the breadcrumbs of that calm feeling now. And if the feelings are erratic, then I just know to stay away from there because it just won't make sense to go there in the first place. And so that is just the natural ebb and flow of my feelings and emotion, the natural ebb and flow of my thinking. And I surf the natural ebb and flow like a surfer would on a surf wave. And I'm not doing anything about it other than surfing it. So this is why I say this is a non-technique. This is just about learning how to surf the wave of thought.
All right, wonderful. It's been a great time with you, Eric. Before we go, is there any way that people can contact you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way through Facebook or my website or something, so just type my name in there and I'll pop up at some point. Just Eric Zuniga, 3P or three principles, and that combination usually will do it.
And what's your website?
It's ericzuniga.com. So that's pretty straightforward.
All right. ericzuniga.com. Wonderful. All right, Eric, it's been a great time with you. And I want to thank you for coming here and sharing the wonderful experience with us. And we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.